BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a couple quick announcements before we begin. The first thing I would like to say is the polling question that I've been putting out over the past few days, and that is that we will be doing a new discussion series in the very near future, and I wanted to see what you guys wanted to hear about more. The first option for the new discussion series is going through the book The Myth of the Zodiac Killer by Thomas Henry Horan, or an open discussion on the Zodiac Manson connection, which would just come at the subject from all angles. But in the first one, we would be reading the book and going along more or less chapter by chapter, but there are no specific rules. I mean, just how many episodes we would do is just up in the air. It's fair. Anything is fair game in that regards. And I should say, we do have one book discussion about the Great Zodiac Killer hoax of 1986 here on this channel, but I've been really tempted to redo that one. But I thought before I did something like that, I would poll you guys to see what would you rather hear about, the Zodiac Manson connection or the myth of the Zodiac Killer. And with the Zodiac Manson connection, we would not be following along with a specific book or writer. We would simply be just going through different pieces of info and trying to learn more about the subject, open discussion, challenge it from all different sides. What would you like to hear about? And this will be the final time that I'll give that type of introduction. The next thing I would say is that before we begin that new, longer discussion series on either the Manson connection or the myth of the Zodiac Killer, I will get to your requested topics. It is now November 1st at the time of this recording, so the West Virginia winds are starting to howl. That's one thing. They're going crazy today. But aside from that, you guys have left a lot of great requested topics that we mentioned in October's AMA Ask Me Anything, and I will be getting to those this week as soon as possible. So we'll do the requests first, and then we'll do this larger discussion series about whatever you guys vote for. And just once again, you can write your response to that polling question in the comments section. Do you want to hear about the myth of the Zodiac Killer or the Zodiac Manson connection? I would love to see some comments from you guys on that. Moving on to today's topic. Welcome to a series that we do here called What Is? That's just it, a segment called What Is? And today is What is a Toxic Personality? I'd say in 2019, we started talking a lot more about serial killers on this channel and looking at how they function, how they operate, as well as the thought process that is associated with serial killers. And I was mentioning an upload that we had done recently called Serial Killers versus Abusive Relationships. And I learned about this stuff when I was reading the book Life Code, and I really began to notice that a lot of the criticisms that people make of someone in an abusive relationship sounds a lot like the personalities of the people that are in the serial killer literature. Antisocial behavior, deviance, as well as just disregard for the well-being of other people. Of course, they would be going at this in different ways, but I just noticed a lot of similarities. And recently, I'd wanted to learn more about the concept of toxicity and what really constitutes the meaning of a toxic relationship or a toxic personality. But I was quite surprised when I was reading about this subject online because it seemed every single website that you would go to would have a different answer about what is a toxic personality. And let's just go right over here to one that comes to us from Dr. Rand Brown, who gives a possible definition of what a toxic personality is. Number one, a pathological liar who is unable to completely or be truthful about anything with anyone. Number two, extremely egotistical, truly believing they are above the rest of humanity, arrogant. Number three, do not accept responsibility for their actions, have no qualms about blaming others. Number four, remorselessly vindictive when challenged or feeling slighted. Number five, moral values are absent in their lives and they have no empathy for others. They mask their callousness behind a social facade and a persona they are highly invested in. And when I was reading things like that, and there are many of these out there, I was just thinking that this really doesn't sound exactly like the type of people that I had thought of being toxic. And I don't know what you guys would like to say. I mean, we can begin just with the challenge question. What do you think constitutes a toxic personality? And please feel free to share anything from your own personal experience, because this is another one here just from this is actually from Mind's Journal that says toxic people are those who spread negativity, those who criticize you all the time, those who waste your time, those who are jealous, those who are play the victim, those who don't care, those who are self-centered, and those who keep disappointing you. I think that's quite different than the first set of points that we read off. But the thing that I would say about this one is that we have really the opportunity to see that maybe you can think of somebody that would encompass some of these points, but not all. I mean, spreading negativity is a pretty general thing, but if you look at someone like maybe you know somebody whom you would think about when you hear the term toxic personality, but they really don't criticize you all the time. In fact, it could be something quite to the contrary. They might do more like number 8 on this list. They keep disappointing you. And but the disappointment comes more from being emotionally unavailable as opposed to criticism. And yes, I'm drawing upon a lot of personal experience on that one. No, and to get even more personal, I would say that about 12 years ago, I'm 32 now, so I was around 20 at the time. Like, I was in a relationship in my college years, and the person that I was, dating was very different during the first month of our relationship. And I'm sure some people are going to have some similar things to say, so please share your experiences in the comment section. But what it was like is the first month, everything is just sunshine and rainbows, and everything was just so mild-mannered and just so pleasant. And it's like after 30 days, the expiration date was revealed, and then it just got really sour. By it, I mean the relationship. And her personality really began to change. She began to be much more critical, or just erupting over very small things, and much more of many of these points that were mentioned here, just being very negative, emotionally unavailable, not accepting responsibility, and always playing the victim card. So I definitely think that there's this one quote that I heard on a radio show once when someone said, relationships follow a simple rule. This guy said that how it starts is how it stays. And I do not believe that at all. What he's saying is like, if a relationship starts really mellow, it's going to stay really mellow. And I mean, I had just gotten out of that problematic relationship that was good for about a month, and then it turned really south. So I was like, oh no. People can definitely be deceptive. And the person that I was talking about, even, she openly admitted all of that. She's like, yeah, when I first meet people, I'm very polite and I try to get along. But then after, as we said, about 30 days, then she just becomes much more tyrannical. And this is pure human psychology about the way that this functions. This is not a justification for anybody's toxicity, but people push boundaries to see what they can get away with. During that first 30 days, she was first and foremost trying to have good experiences for herself because she's the center of her story, not me. She's the protagonist in her mind, not me or anybody else. She's just trying to have good experiences for herself, but then she's going to start pushing the boundaries to see what she can do to get away with, and she's going to try and create a power structure. She's going to try to do something to establish herself as the more dominant entity, and if she doesn't get what she wants, then she will do things in a harsher way, or she'll find a way to do something in a much more dominance hierarchy oriented manner. And this is what often happens in relationships. The more agreeable person can often become subjective to the less agreeable person's, well, their way of anything. And I guess one of the motivations for choosing this upload today, what is a toxic personality, is I really wanted to know, firstly, like, what are the exact criteria of being a toxic person? And there is no consensus on this. Every website you're going to go to, or every book that you're going to read is going to have some type of difference. It's really not like the DSM, and there is a very clear consensus among any community about what a toxic personality is, but we will look through several possibilities. But what I really wanted to know was, why do people behave in certain ways? Like, for example, why is somebody going to antagonize the more agreeable person? I mean, you could just say that this is human nature, this is life, get used to it. But I don't really accept that. I always wanted to know, what is the thought process associated with this type of thinking? And I found one thing it was on Google Images. It was just a meme. It wasn't even a website, and I couldn't find the exact one, but it said something to the effect of, people who often get manipulated have two things in common. Number one, they're too warm and sunny. And number two, they are good listeners. And like, I mean, I just had never read anything that shared it that bluntly about this, why any type of quote unquote toxic personality is going to almost seek out a particular victim, if you will. And I mean, that's what this thing on Google Images that I couldn't find had wanted to share. They said that people who are warm and sunny and who are good listeners are going to be more often than not the person who gets manipulated in a relationship. And if anybody has anything they want to weigh in on, anything they want to say about any of this stuff, please share it in the comment section below. I would say that that's food for thought, but what I would also say about that is that does not appear to be an exact scientific statement. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next one here, and this one is from TyrannyTube, which says, signs of a toxic person. Number 1, nothing you say or do is good enough. Number 2, they comment on the smallest flaw or perceived imperfection. Number 3, they drag up your past and won't allow you to be different. Number 4, they act like they are fabulous. Sorry, that just sounds a little silly, and never make mistakes. Number 5, they leave you feeling guilty and are ashamed of who you are. Number 6, they're critical, controlling, and don't think about your needs. Number 7, they leave you feeling beaten, wounded, battered, bruised, and torn. Number 8, they violate your boundaries and never respect no. Number 9, they don't care about your feelings and they like to see you suffer. Actually, I mean, that's point number 9. I would say that that has to be two separate issues. I mean, like, both of them are bad, but I don't think people do that one always at the same time. In fact, like, I would say that many people I know that might be deemed toxic would more or less be in the category of they don't care about your feelings, but they are more or less indifferent to your suffering. They aren't actively trying to make you suffer. They're just trying to force their way on the subject, and they are indifferent. It's not exactly like taking delight in someone else's misery. It's just they aren't even concerned with your well-being at all. I mean, you're no different than moving an object from one side to another, as dehumanizing as that sounds. And number 10 here on the list is, it's always about them, what they think and what they want and what they feel. Now, there are many things here in this list of signs of a toxic person from TyrannyTube, but the thing to say about it is that I cannot think of a person that I know that it encompasses all 10 of these. I would say that I can definitely think of maybe 3 or 4 people that would be matched up to 3 or 4 different items on this list. But for me, I would say that when I thought of the term toxic personality in the past, it would just be someone who is spreading negativity. Because I read this one thing once talking about how toxic people will criticize everything that you do to the point where you just give up and then you're just completely docile and you're going along with everything they say. And you could think of it perhaps as breaking somebody's will, but when I think of the term breaking somebody's will, I feel that that's almost this connotation that it's done by force or that it's done by intense emotional pressure, whereas this one would be done more about very subtle emotional pressure. And it would just be like discouraging people from absolutely everything. No, don't apply for that job. No, don't think about moving to that apartment. No, don't try to open a business. No, don't go back to school because of all these reasons. They're going to criticize every single thing that you do. And one of the sad, unshared things that people don't tell you about when you're a kid is that sometimes, or maybe even all the time, you're going to be in a relationship with somebody and the other person has an agenda. And what I'm almost certain you would want is that both people have the same agenda and they want to improve the same characteristics. But sometimes people are going to be naysaying simply because they do not want it to go against their agenda. Oh, if you do any of those things, go back to school, take that job, get that apartment, it would affect something in their life, or it would affect their ability to control certain aspects of the situation. And I think that that is something that perhaps happens, maybe not every single time, but that is something that's very frequent in relationships. And there's also something that we should share on that particular note when we're saying, I read this in a magazine once. I was in the hospital waiting room for something associated with my grandmother back in 2010, I think it was, or thereabouts. And it was talking about how there was the self-help column. And what the person writing the column was saying is that if you have told your partner no, and something about something that is bothering you, and they keep doing it, that means they are choosing their vision for the relationship over your vision. And this could just as easily apply to friendships. This could just as easily apply to issues with family. If you've told somebody no and that something is bothering you and they keep doing it, they're choosing their vision over your vision. And I mean, that's something that stayed with me mostly for the rest of my life. But the other side of that coin is something that is quite different. Because what I would say about that is that, I mean, what if somebody is dealing with something that actually is destructive, and they're telling we want to talk about your heroin addiction. We want to talk about any form of your destructive behavior. It's like, I've told you it bothers me when you talk about my heroin addiction and my destructive behavior. Then yeah, that person is choosing their vision for the relationship over their partners. It just doesn't mean that they are always in the wrong. And this is why we have to sort things out through discussions. And this is why, like, there is this concept known as the gray area. We have to navigate it because life is not always as simple as it seems. And I would like to read another one here. This is from Lori Season, just spelled like the word season, Season. A toxic person is anyone who is abusive, unsupportive, or unhealthy emotionally. Someone who basically brings you down more than up. You may begin to feel dependent on him or her for their opinion, doubting your own. And see, this is why I wanted to say that there are so many things that we have gone through where perhaps you could match them to a person in your life where you're like, okay, I know exactly who you're talking about. But then there is also one sentence on the list, or there's one sentence in the paragraph like this one, and you're like, wait a second, the person I was thinking about, okay, they encompass most of those things, but not all of them. And I would definitely say that I can definitely think of people who are unsupportive and unhealthy emotionally, but to make me ever doubt my own opinion and I would rely on their opinions, no, I can't really say that I've ever met anyone who would go to that level. But what I would say is that I do not want to downplay the concept of agenda because sometimes people are just trying to discourage you so that they can move you to a desired outcome. And that's more about like the concept of doubting someone's own opinion, where they want you to go along with their plan in life, even if it's just for an arbitrary reason. I mean, maybe they want to look good in front of their friends and family and they don't want to their reputation to be damaged, so they want this to happen, and maybe they've already made some promise with somebody else that they didn't tell you about it. And once again, this can apply to friends, family, romantic relationships, anything across the board. But there's one thing here that comes to us from Stigma Free Zone, and this is a quote from Danielle Koepke, Koepke. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, that says, "You don't ever have to feel guilty about removing toxic people from your life. It doesn't matter whether someone is a relative, romantic interest, employer, childhood friend, or new acquaintance. You don't have to make room for people who cause you pain or make you feel small. It's one thing if a person owns up to their behavior and makes an effort to change. But if a person disregards your feelings, ignores your boundaries, and continues to treat you in a harmful way, they need to go." See, this is very good because it talks about continuing to treat someone in a harmful way. The person who's trying to talk to somebody about problems with addiction or maybe some other type of problem with mental health, they are trying to control the situation, but they're not doing it in a harmful way. So that is something very important that we should highlight. And this is like one, I mean, because you're just going to talk about disregarding someone's feelings and ignoring their boundaries. Yeah, the person who is trying to persuade someone in somewhat of a beneficial way, they are good at times going to be intrusive, but it's not necessarily always going to be coming from a malicious place. And there was another one that I had been reading about that was talking all about the concept of sensitivity. And they're saying that a toxic person will often use the defense, you are being overly sensitive about something. And I started listening to this one podcast earlier this year called Yo, Is This Racist?, which is hosted by two individuals named Andrew and Tawny. They do a really good job with it. It's available on radio.com. And one point that was made was just that just because somebody is being overly sensitive about something, it doesn't mean they are in the wrong. And at that time, I had to kind of look back at the times when I have thought about how I was saying something to somebody and they had this reaction. I'm like, oh, this person's just overly sensitive. I mean, they obviously aren't responding to me the way that I want. And then I had to think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the one who was being overly intrusive, or I was saying something unwanted, or once again, I am invading someone else's space and via crossing their boundaries. So, I mean, it's not that sensitive people are always right, because the final thing that I would like to say is agreeable, sensitive people can often manipulate in their own way. And we could do an entire upload on this. I just don't think it's something that people are even going to want to hear that badly, because what I would say is I learned about this from Dr. Robert Glover, who wrote the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. But he also talks about how people who think that they are quote unquote nice are often very reluctant to change, because they simply view the situation as, I'm not yelling at people, I'm not saying nasty things to people, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, therefore I don't have to change. Everybody else around me has to change. And this is how someone who is very sensitive and very agreeable can spread toxicity in their own way. Nobody in life is perfect. And I think it's valuable to highlight this particular issue, because when we look at this type of situation, we can say that there are just different ways to live. And I think that this quote here that was written by Daniel Kupke is saying something very valuable, when it's like, it's about reducing harm. It's about identifying where the harm is and removing that. Because the sensitive, agreeable person is just going to think, I'm not doing anything harmful. But what they aren't paying attention to is they're actually being very arrogant. They're actually being very demanding. They're actually insisting that everybody around them in their life has to live in a particular way conforming to their personality. But another point is, the people who are perhaps more traditionally toxic, the loud types, the insulting types, and the controlling, manipulative, and even sadistic types, they're saying the same thing. They want everyone around them to control to their personality. And this is a big pattern and trend with personalities that I've noticed from people over the last 5 years since I've been reading more about psychology, is that so many people demand that the world must live according to their personality. And when the world doesn't conform to their personality, they either get very angry, or in the case of the sensitive, agreeable person, they're going to withdraw. And like, they just won't interact with that particular group. Oh, hey, these people aren't doing what I want, well, I'm going to go somewhere else. Whereas the person who's going to be more confrontational is just going to erupt like a volcano, and they're going to try and take their stance by force, or in some ways it's just going to be very vocally, but vocal force. That could be a new expression that we are going to use. All right, well, that's all for me now today. What would you like to say about toxic relationships? Is there a personal story or experience that you would like to share? If you have anything to say at all, you can drop your idea in the comment section below, and our upload on serial killers versus abusive relationships will be available in the description box here. The best way you can support this channel is just by listening to some more content, never asking for any money. All you got to do is listen. That will be available in the description box here. All right, that's all for me now. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.